before I tell you my max but voice note limit, what's the longest you have talked?
Oh, I feel called out. I will admit, because it was a very, to me, delightful day when in Facebook Messenger they changed from 1 minute limits to unlimited minutes. A friend and I, there may be 28 minutes of a voice note, just a 28-minute voice note. Like, really?
So you sent the 28-minute voice note.
Yes. Yes. But to be fair, kind of like you and your friend, we because of like time zone differences and stuff, we don't always like match up. So we were just like, hey, you fill me in, I'll fill you in. Listen when you can, no rush, and the next thing you know, you've just racked up a nice long monologue for them.
Happy Friday, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Weekly Bustle. I'm Ahad, your host, and I'm joined today by Brienne Hennessy. Brienne, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for having me, Ahad.
I am also very excited to see you. Where are you calling in from?
Madison, Wisconsin, and I would like to do a land acknowledgement. So it originally belonged to the Ho-Chunk tribe indigenous peoples, and that's in the
Oh,
United States.
wonderful,
Mhm.
wonderful. And how is the weather there?
Oh, gloriously sunny, too windy. And I say that because I love being out on the lake, but you can't go stand up paddleboard in crazy winds. So it's
Unbelievable.
lovely. It's lake time. And
Oh,
yeah.
that's amazing to hear. Usually I ask on every episode of mine about how the weather is in the place you're calling in from, because
Yeah.
I'm, to be honest, jealous. I'm envious of
Mm.
most people who I have a call with, because I live in the Netherlands, and
Ah,
here the weather is mostly windy,
ah.
very rarely sunny, and a
Oh,
lot
I
of
didn't.
rain.
Oh,
And
I didn't
I
realize that for Netherlands.
Yes, it
Oh,
is. It is quite wet weather. It's basically a bit like the UK. So the
ah.
UK also has a
Okay.
lot of wet weather. So
Yep.
yes, to be fair, I love it because I'm
Uh-huh.
from originally from a very dry place in the world. I'm from Pakistan,
Okay.
so I get to see a lot of rain. I really enjoy it, but I do
Yeah.
understand the struggle when it's raining
Yeah.
24/7 and you go like, yeah. So that's why I really like to ask this question, and it's great to see that you are enjoying some of the wind that we face here in the Netherlands almost all the time. So that's great.
Exactly.
So that's wonderful. But thank you so much
Love
for
it.
coming on the podcast. I would like you to introduce yourself so that we can get the ball rolling. As I mentioned, we don't really know anything about you, Brienne. So
Okay.
from top to zero, who is Brienne?
Absolutely. So, as y'all can maybe see on the screen, my pronouns are she, her, hers. I have a background as a speech and voice pathologist, but most importantly, these days, my mission really focuses on showing up and being a guide to anyone who needs to protect their voice to do their job. So we'll dig into that a little bit. But I honestly am now a 4.5 year entrepreneur, which is wild to me to think that this has been going on that long. And I am someone who loves connecting with other people, loves also my replenishment time. So it kind of comes into both the work that I do and how I approach my day to day.
Oh, that's very nice. I have so many questions already
Yes.
because I'm quite curious as a person, and whenever I hear such niche roles and such niche
Mm.
businesses, I always get
Hmm.
curious that, okay, first of all, how does it work? And second of all, why does it exist? And yeah, that question is a bit
Mm.
difficult yet easy to answer because, yes, in a capitalist world, whenever there is demand, there is supply, right? So if you have
Yeah.
people who want to improve their speech, you will have people who can provide speech training. So I know that, but I still want to know the why more clearly from you. So
Yeah.
why why speech pathology? Why vocal training?
Mm. So yes, we'll distinguish a couple of things. So while my background is speech and voice pathology, even within that profession, people can subspecialize. And so my subspecialty within that is all things voice. And for 14 years, I was in prominent voice clinics throughout the US rehabilitating injured voices. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is sometimes it's just a voice issue. There is no speech change, meaning the speech sounds, how the person is able to speak is totally fine. But the quality of the voice has deteriorated and they're not able to do what they need to do. So I focused on the latter, the quality of the voice, the function of the voice. And that really evolved into me wanting to reach more people in a more accessible and custom way. Because in that healthcare time, one of the biggest things that people would say to me is, why now? I teach, I do sales, I'm a preacher, I'm a coach, an entrepreneur. I've been talking all my life. Why is my voice now having issues? And so we tease apart those reasons, but there's this gap in just the understanding of how you can protect the voice, how you can preventatively care for it. And so that really distinguishes, I think, a lot of what people think of, which is, oh, so you do voice like with singers. I used to work with singers in the clinic, but that's not my focus. We use our speaking voice far more than we sing, even if we love belting out in the shower. So I focus in on the voice in that way, because if you're preparing for, say, a keynote speech, and anywhere from a week to 24 hours before that event, your voice starts to go out on you, what are you going to do? Are you going to cancel that gig? Are you going to, forego that income? How is that going to work? And so that's one example of how it really comes forward. But the other is people don't feel comfortable speaking in public more often than not. And when they are trained on how to do that, it's a little more of the fake it till you make it. And I don't really believe in that concept. I don't think we need to put on or pretend or focus on very surface level things like here's your speech, or here's what you're going to say, or here's how you're going to talk. You have to tap into how natural your voice can come through and what that feels and sounds like to you.
It sounds like you're mixing a little bit of biology with a little bit of more of a spiritual, holistic way of looking at things, right? So
Yeah.
it's not just healing voices from a medical sense, but it's also like finding out what kind of voice you have. And you also mentioned something like there's an outer voice and an inner voice. So is
Yes.
what is the connection there?
Yes. Yeah. Great observation. So that is where I come at it a little more unconventionally, because I want people to think preventatively. I know that's hard for a lot of us who are just in a only when it gets so painful that they're willing to change it. But if we take those steps back and think preventatively, how to protect an instrument that you might absolutely rely on to make your income, have your livelihood. And at the same time, that physicality is just one component of the voice. I believe we all have an intuitive inner voice, and I believe that is divine, source, universe, God, whatever you want to call it. When we are listening to our inner intuition and speaking from that place, we've now connected the physical sound that we each uniquely create and doing that at its most healthy, optimal level, while also bringing forth our truest way of being. And people resonate with that. Have you ever had the experience I had where someone is, especially as a podcast host, someone saying something and you're like, cool, I'm picking up what they're putting down in the words, but I don't know, something still seems off. Like maybe it doesn't
Yeah.
match. We have this like sense as humans to be able to go, I don't know about that. Part of that, I believe, is when we aren't speaking from that inner intuitive place, and or we don't even believe what we're trying to say. We are either so up in our head about it, so nervous, there's a bunch of mind chatter, and at the same time, we're trying to, again, fumble along maybe with what somebody else thinks we should say or how we should say it. And so that's where I really try to combine the two sides of the same coin, because the voice will show up. If the voice shakes, if there's cracking in and out, if it starts to fade and get weak, that can be a sign that there are some internal things physically and loosely, you can think of it like confidence, that aren't aligned yet.
That's quite interesting. So I would think that it could be a sort of training, like an instrument, how you practice on it.
Yep.
But you're also talking about not just training the instrument, but also training the thought behind the instrument. So it's
Yes.
not just what you're saying, but also why you're saying it. That becomes a bit more difficult for me personally, because I also am a speaker and a podcaster, and I
Yeah.
run with any idea a person gives me, even if I don't believe it sometimes. But I
Okay.
do not know. I do not know if people catch it because you have your own opinion, right? You feel like you
Yes.
aced it, but no one gives you
Yes.
feedback that, oh no, you didn't ace it. I could see that you didn't ace it. So I don't have the example to share from that perspective. But from my understanding, do you also provide speech training of sorts, like to know how to
Mm.
identify those cracks and fix it? Or do you think the cause is behind it and you really focus on that cause on a holistic level?
Mm. Both, because it depends on where the person's at in their journey. So some people come to me with more of that, like what you were just describing, is kind of in the realm of tone of voice issue. I always get misunderstood for my tone of voice, they'll say. Or people will, say I need to sound, more authoritative, or I'm too shrill, or I'm too this or too that. It often happens to women more than men. But there's those moments where they just feel like there's a communication breakdown that's happening from how they're saying something. But honestly, when people first come to me, if it's not necessarily the communication breakdown frustrations that they're having, it's that their voice quality is not sustainable, that they're not having a clear, strong, powerful voice that feels like them, and they're trying to get through a day, a week, an event, and the voice just isn't keeping up in that way. So yes, it's the initial physical training of it, but then we do have to get deeper, because I believe that that is often a manifestation just showing up physically in the voice, where some people get stress, emotional, triggers, and it creates stomach ulcers, for example. So we kind of come at it into both ways, but it really depends on what they're initially most frustrated with. And more often than not, it's that they weren't heard for what they wanted to say when they spoke up, or their voice function is just not letting them do all the activities they need to do.
I really resonate and I really enjoy this section of the conversation because I personally also have this communication breakdown, as you mentioned, but it is
Ah,
the
okay.
other way around because I speak very fast.
Mm,
And
hmm.
I know the reason why, because I was raised in an
Okay.
environment where we all were very fast talkers and loud talkers. So you had to
Yeah.
talk fast and loud to get your point across, or else no one will
Hmm.
listen to you. They will just talk over you. So
Right.
now from there, I moved to a country where people are very soft spoken. They're all so
Mm.
soft. They all are so clear.
Hmm.
They're also slow. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but
No, just a slower rate of speech. Yeah.
yes. And
Yeah.
it gets difficult for me. And I consciously try to practice these breaks and these pauses. But my question to you again goes on the why of things. If I try to train myself to become this more of an ideal voice in this particular environment, but who I am, is that the voice that I had? Or is that the voice that I want to have?
Mhm.
Because I am known for my excitement, and that
Yeah.
comes from the fact that my brain is thinking faster than my mouth, and that's
Yeah.
why I rubble so fast.
Yeah.
But then if I change that, just so I can sound nicer
Hmm.
on a podcast, maybe with a
Hmm.
softer tone or on a keynote
Hmm.
speech, am I losing myself in trying to get
Mm.
to
Good
where
question.
I want to be?
I think no, not at all. You are giving yourself more choices. So you have options and choices with your voice, depending on the context, the person, the situation, the intention behind it. And so just like anything where we are looking at where we're at now in any endeavor and any self-growth point, and saying, who are we now and who do we desire to be? We can tap into that natural, true, both voice of our mission, our message, how we communicate, our unique personality. Absolutely, and still say, okay, and what does the kind of idyllic version of that feel like, sound like, talk like? And it may be exactly where you already are feeling most comfortable. That's beautiful. So this is never about taking someone's personality and changing it or shifting it. It's always about helping them tap into what's already within and making sure they're speaking in that way, so that, yes, if someone goes, Ahad, I really, for this context, I'd really love for you to kind of pace yourself a little bit more, but don't lose the excitement, right? Don't lose showing up as that full whole self, because that's where people go, something feels off. Yeah. So it's in that way that I think it's really important for people to recognize that it's not just enough to speak in the way you've always spoken. I think it's important to look at what's possible in enhancing communication. And I just happen to come at it from voice health and our intuition.
I really enjoyed that piece of the last piece of what you said,
Hmm.
that it's not about that you want to get somewhere, or like you're born with this and this is what defines you. And
Mhm.
at the end, it's all about communication. I also always
Yeah.
try to boil everything down to communication, and get mesmerized by the fact that how can we explain so many problems around us happening just because of communication. And
Yeah.
you come with the lens of voice health, right?
Yeah.
So you look at enhanced communication and you go like, okay, how can I increase it? How can I make it better? Why don't I look at it from the voice health perspective? And that's where I want to take the conversation now. We understand a little bit
Fun.
of the why, we understand a little bit of the how and how it's related. But I still don't understand why you got into this 13 years
Mm.
ago, 20 years ago,
Yeah.
30 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Into
It was, yeah. I went, when did I, God, that takes me back. You know, when your brain goes, wait, what year did I go to grad school? So I finished grad school in 2007. Yeah.
2007.
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's what,
Yeah.
almost 17, 18 years. So
Yeah.
that's pretty far away. So so long you start, and then that's just ending grad school. So you also chose to start grad school in this particular
Yeah.
subsection of the human body or the human mind in a
Yeah.
way. And I'm really curious to understand why, because it's not usual to hear voice pathologists or speech therapists
Yeah.
turned coach as well. But generally, it's such a niche area of the human to focus on. So why?
Yeah. What would you do if you didn't have your voice tomorrow morning? There are many, many, many humans who do still have their voice. And what I mean by that is not all. I worked with humans who no longer even had a physical larynx. Their larynx was removed for various reasons, medical reasons, etc. So it's always something that I think we take for granted. But when we truly think about why and what we would do if we didn't have it, why do we have it? What can we wield with it? I think that puts it in a whole new perspective. And I always knew that similarly, I was someone who uh, would get very excitable, love to chat, love to be a talker, own that. Oh, I own the fact that I'm a talker. And I did not like when I was misunderstood. Who does really? But that's a self-growth edge where you go, are you going to be reactive about it? Are you going to get angry about it? Or are you going to be able to take that newer perspective and see, okay, what is it that I can also shift and change and tune into as to why this misunderstanding is happening? So in that brings me to a little bit of, here I am finishing grad school, going into these, really well-known voice clinics, helping people get their voice better and better, all these different things. And meanwhile, relationship wise, I was having more difficulty with managers and administrators and people that I work with. I was having difficulty communicating with them. Even speech pathologists were not immune to this. And also at home. At the time, I was still married and the communication breakdowns were happening more often. So this was creating such a chasm, right? Such a dissonance. But at the time, I didn't recognize it as anything necessarily from within. All I knew was that the mind chatter of me telling myself what I should do or how I'm supposed to sound or why aren't they understanding me or let me just push and, force it harder to be understood was taking over. And so that's really when things shifted to understanding the two sides of the coin that I mentioned, both the outer physical voice and the inner intuitive voice. Because by 2013, I had just landed a new job and we'd moved to Wisconsin at a prominent voice clinic here. And the next thing you know, I was separated and my partner wanted a divorce. And we were going through all this very tumultuous situation in that I felt so disconnected from who I was, anxiety, depression, Again, that sense of pushing. If I just keep explaining myself, then they'll understand. Mm-mm. Right? Where do we take that step back? And I don't use this word lightly, Ahad, because we know, especially in our industries, like it's tossed around a lot. But through that, mere months after that, I had that, what I now recognize is that dark night of the soul into transformation of reconnecting with my own self worth. So when that happened, it started to be this whole new trajectory of how I viewed myself, what that meant from how I perceived the world around me. And subsequently, in the next 7 years at the clinic, I started to see those connections in some of the folks I was working with. They weren't being misunderstood. They weren't being understood, and they felt more frustration in whatever that missed communication was. But ultimately, they didn't even feel worthy to be heard in the first place. And so when I started connecting those dots, worthiness comes down to so much of how we operate in the world, whether or not we feel worthy. And knowing that we're worthy no matter what is happening is a huge leap for some people to make. But I believe that when we can get into that space of we are worthy to be heard, our voices are worthy to be heard, how can we cultivate that and ultimately just happen to do that in a way that also embraces the sounds that we make? I think that really creates a ripple effect that, again, most people don't necessarily give a second thought to.
It's it's wonderful how your journey shapes the way you looked at the world, right? So it all started from a very
Very much.
physical, like from a
Very much.
physical
Yeah.
dimension, right? You were just thinking,
Mm-hmm.
okay, what happens to you, Ahad, if you lose your voice tomorrow, right?
Yep.
That's where you began. And I don't know the answer. I completely agree with you, not
Okay.
just my voice, but with anything, right? With anything. I
Yeah.
look at
Yeah.
how would I feel if I wouldn't have my arms? How would I feel if I wouldn't
That's
have
right.
my legs? How would I feel
That's
if
right.
I lost the sense of smell? And I tell my wife, I don't know. I don't know what
Yeah.
I would do. And they're like, yeah,
Yeah.
we know there is evidence after evidence that you are going to revert back to the mean. Your happiness levels are going to come back. You're just going to
Yeah.
adjust to the new normal. But as of now, you don't want to accept that. You're like, no, I don't know what I'm going to do. It's just going to be
Mm.
shocking. I can't imagine living in that kind of a world because you've already seen it. You already know how to speak.
Yeah.
For those who were without the privilege of that, you can't speak for them because they haven't seen that
Yeah.
kind of a life yet. But we had something and we lost something. So
Yeah.
from that dimension of losing your voice to actually metaphorically losing your voice in your
Mm-hmm.
relationships, in your work
Mm-hmm.
environment, to finally finding your voice. It's very nice to
Yeah.
see that you take this holistic approach to your clients as well and try to make them understand it's not just preventive care for your throat or your voice, but it's
Right.
also preventive care for your soul in a way.
Yeah. Love
Yeah.
that. Yes.
It's I really,
Yeah.
really, really,
Absolutely.
really enjoy that. I think it's a very wonderful way of looking at the world, and that's what I really enjoy, Brian, about talking to different people and about
Yeah.
looking at the world from different lenses. Everyone has their own lens. Everyone's looking
Yeah.
at the world from this biased lens about how they were raised, where they were
Yeah.
raised, what kind of work they do. I'm a data consultant. So I
Yeah.
look at the world from numbers. That's all I
Yeah.
do. And that's why everyone tells me, why do you have such a capitalistic approach or such a utilitarian approach when you're talking about stuff? And I'm like, yeah, because those two things are based in numbers. So it's
Yeah.
very easy for me to quantify the world in those things because it makes sense to me. Do I believe it?
Exactly.
Do I think that's the only way? No. But it's
Yeah.
just easier for me to digest everything around me. So
Yeah.
you start with something like that. You start with something in voice pathology. You move to a place now. You're doing this holistic practice. What comes
Mm-hmm.
next? Where do you think
Mm.
Brienne goes now after looking at the world from this perspective?
From a what's on the bucket list of this year, for example, it really is reaching more people, being on more stages, really making sure that people understand the kind of bigger potential for themselves. And I know this world lives in pain points. Like, let's focus on the pain points. Let's drill down to the pain points. But I always see possibility in people and in that potential. So for me, it's continuing to stretch myself in my own voice of how visible I allow myself to be, how much I am able to delve into more creations, more putting myself out there. And even just this morning, it it was interesting. I was in a wonderful small business community that I'm in, and one of the pieces of feedback that I got as we do kind of these idea mastermind moments, as you can imagine, you're not alone. I mean, most people I have a little bit more of a runway to explain, what is it I do and how can it, show up for people and work for people. And one of the members said, I don't think your work impacts anybody. And at first, of course, one would be a little struck in the ego heart about that, right? But from that bigger perspective, from that ability to go, okay, I'm going to detach from clinging to anything that I have done or anything that is seemingly true for me now. I'm going to tune in and I'm going to listen to that intuition and follow in what that guidance is. What she was saying was, because people don't look at things preventatively, even though I'm over here hoping, wishing, praising them when they do, how can you be willing to let go of what you've done in order to move to the thing that you're going towards? So your question, Ahad, is very timely, because I'm right kind of in that mode of both. I want to be, out there more sharing about this. And at the same time, how can I still meet people where they are? Not where I think they should be, but where they are. Yeah. So well, I don't have any concrete numbers or data for you to say what exactly is next. I go in faith. So for allowing in the how, that's one of my favorite acronyms. And I really am proud of myself for honing in on the fact that I want to be a well-paid, highly, sought after speaker. I want to serve my folks one-on-one. I also want to write more. That's been coming through a lot. So that's what feels best as next. And then from there, we shall see.
It's I want to switch gears a little bit. So we talked about
Yeah.
pathology, but I'm really, really interested in your entrepreneurship journey now.
Yeah.
That what you
Sure.
talked about so far, I resonate with you because I'm also an entrepreneur of sorts, right? So I
Yeah.
also have been through trying multiple different things and failing
Yeah.
at multiple different things, to be really honest, because that's how
Yep.
it works, right?
That's
It's
how it works.
I always use this analogy that you have these wet tissues in your hand and you're throwing them on the wall and you're hoping one of them sticks, right?
Yep.
That's what you're trying. But the way you're going at it seems so calculated to me as a person, because I look at
Hmm.
the world as calculation, that you go to these mastermind groups, you get to work with people, you're able to detach yourself from your idea.
Yeah.
And my question is very simple. How are you managing it so far? Because when I go at something, I struggle to detach. I struggle to accept the fact that, okay, I have a wrong idea till it like hits me in the face, right? That
Hmm.
you go like, oh, okay, this is not working. People are not buying it. So
Right.
how do you get to, as what you said, want to meet people there where they are rather than where you want them to be? And that could also mean flexing up your idea a little bit. That could also mean
Yeah.
accepting that maybe what you're offering is not enough. How do you
Yeah.
reconcile with that?
Deep, lengthy self growth work, inner work, and, not being afraid to like have a good ugly cry every now and then. And like, moments of this is really, I mean, as all things, I think all things in divine timing, when we're meeting and having this conversation, I've been in having my business since 2019, late 2019. I am only just now in these last few months had like getting into that sense of like, oh, okay, so this is how I can stop my shiny object syndrome, which is a little bit like see what works, throwing it at the wall. You're, scattering yourself everywhere. That was me for the first 3.5 years at least. Lots of investments later, a lot of them that didn't work out. And so having that understanding that, yes, I believe in myself and this mission, but you have to reconnect to that as often as you can, because when it gets wobbly, real wobbly, there's nothing external that you can grasp onto. So for me, having it now feel much more and getting more evidence, physical, external evidence, that when I detach, things go better. When I detach, it all ends up working out for me, even if it's not what I expected. But that is a daily practice and intention. So for me, I start it with more of that intention and also simplifying. So like I said, the shiny object syndrome had me in a lot of different buckets. And honestly, I wouldn't have, learned the things I was meant to learn. And at the same time, keep in mind, I was jumping from healthcare and academia into entrepreneurship. Those are two different ways of thinking. 100%. I didn't know about mindset. I didn't know about what it took to build a business, nothing. And so, even teaching myself that, and with the support of mentors, you can still get in your own way, like you can still just totally get in your own way. So, now this year, it's really been about the simplification and reconnecting to that bigger belief both in myself and the mission. But, there are days where I think too little, too late, right? Like the things that I could have been implementing or better, could have been better with my numbers early on, like I could have known my numbers earlier on. I don't know that of course you can't, what ifs are what they are. You can't let yourself get down with those. But it does kind of crack me up that the universe was like, oh, now it's clicking and we're going to like figure this out like as we go, So yeah, it's just been an interesting ebb and flow.
I it's wonderful to see the excitement on your face, given how difficult it can be. Because I
Yeah.
know from experience, and I can see it in
Yeah.
your stories as well. And it is life teaching lessons.
Yeah.
And the one part I would like to push back on a little bit is when you
Yeah.
said that
Let's hear
it's
it.
too little, too late. And I
Uh,
disagree with that because it's never too late, right? I always say that you learned,
True.
you get back up, and you try again. And that's why the fact that you already passed the shiny object syndrome, the one that
Yeah.
I'm struggling with, that tells me that the growth is possible, right? So I can
Yeah.
get from here to here where Brienne is, and Brienne can get from here to somewhere else where
Exactly.
she understands the learning she got from. So I
Exactly.
really think it's an it's a respectful journey to take as an entrepreneur. It's a
Mm-hmm.
scary journey to take as an entrepreneur. And
Yeah.
even if it all doesn't work out, you have so many experiences that you can share
Yeah.
with people around you, which
Mm.
you can be proud of yourself that I've worked with this. And this takes me to the last part of this entrepreneurship journey I'm trying to understand from you is
Yeah.
having that support system around you is also something that I never had. And I don't know why.
Mm.
I
Mm.
sincerely believe in the sense of community, but when you go to these mastermind groups, I tried some of them myself, but I felt a disconnect. But you apparently really
Mm.
enjoy that. So I want to take the conversation towards that direction that the people
Yeah.
around you, how do you surround yourself with the people who are thinking for you, Brienne? Because I can hear that you're surrounding yourself with people who are like mentors and people who want to make you a better person. How
Yeah.
do you find those people?
It's taken a long time, and also understanding that for me, both personally and professionally, there's a season, a reason, and a lifetime with people in our lives. And I tried a lot of different kind of entrepreneur groups, networking groups over the years. And exactly like you said, you can feel when there's a disconnect and you need to trust that. Yeah, even if you're not exactly sure why, or you think, oh, but I'm sure there'll be some opportunity or whatever, lesson coming out of this. I think it's important to always remember the people you're meant to resonate with are out there. And the more you can trust that you're in the rooms you're meant to be in, the more you will flourish. So, in the simplification process this year, I decided, and I feel deciding energy is very powerful. I've leaned into that a lot more. I've decided that, the two core groups that I'm going to be in are it. That's where I'm going to be, and also why, because I do feel that connection to them. There are the ones I mentioned where I was in. I was even a facilitator, a leader position in one of the groups I was in for a year. People loved it. People loved the whole way that I facilitated the group, but the bigger organization was starting to feel dissonant. And I didn't want to have anything more to do with that. So I think we always have to look at in which season what serves us, and then decide that that's where we're going to show up and that's where we're going to be present. And especially when it comes to networking groups, you'll have to I'll be curious about your experience. I had like, I am not about this life of like transactional referral, passing expectations. No, We need to be like relationship centered first, heart centered first, and value can come in a lot of different ways, right? So when people come into a space immediately expecting, what am I going to get? What am I going to get? That literally makes me recoil. Or in the case of like we are talking about with voice, like I can feel my throat tightening with that. Like there are physical symptoms with that. So you have to be honest with yourself of how you're showing up to those spaces as well, and what you want out of them. So for some people, they don't see that yet for any reason. Maybe they were trained to that. That's what they were taught. Go into groups, and this is how you got to act. But this again comes into where are you going to tune into what's true and real for you, and then show up and communicate with others from that place so that they feel that connection. And that's been a beautiful part of me enjoying being out there, because I do need my replenishment time. Like I absolutely am a hermit in my in the other part of my life. So when I am putting myself out there, I am very discerning about the spaces that will both be an energetic match and also be honoring of what I bring to the table as well.
I feel I feel like when you said those kind of people, I don't want to believe, but I feel like I'm one of those people because I feel
Oh,
like
okay.
it's I want to be where you are, right? I want to be in a
Mm,
place where I go like relationships come first, to be really honest
mm,
with you. But
mm-hmm,
the older I'm getting, and maybe this is also like a difference in the generations we were raised,
mm-hmm,
the older that I'm getting, it's getting harder to invest in a relationship because it takes a
mm.
lot of time, right?
It
And I was,
can.
yeah, and I was
Yeah.
talking to a friend of mine, and I was like, okay, we need to make friends. I am in a foreign country. I need to make more friends. And it's not like I don't have friends. I do have
Right.
friends. People
Right.
know my name. People know what I'm doing. I tell people about what I'm up to, and they all show up and
Yeah.
everything. That's fine. But how many of them would be there when I'm sitting in the evening on a weekday, drinking some chai and asking them, "Hey, want to join me for a while?" Not many would show up. And that's not that it's not even that trivial of a thing. It's just that you did would you make time for that person because they're your priority. And to
Right.
get to that level it requires a lot of investment into that relationship. And I think us as a
It
generation
can.
have become more
Yeah.
resistant or hesitant with putting that
Mm-hmm.
time out, maybe because we don't want to get hurt, maybe it's exhausting, maybe we're lazy, maybe whatever reason. So when you tell me you want to be relationship centric first and you have these people who show up who are like transactional, I completely
Yeah.
understand your dismay. I completely understand your disgust. But
Yeah.
what I'm trying to now learn and trying to understand as well is that, okay, but how can I invest in something right now when I don't even know the outcome yet? Because I'm going in
Mm.
with that mindset that, hey, I'm here to learn, I'm here to grow. And if I don't see
Yeah.
anything yet, how long do I have to stay and keep contributing till I get something out of it? And I don't know if that is a good thing or
Mm.
a bad thing.
That's a very human nature thing. I've asked myself the same question when it was feeling so, again, disconnected or out of sorts for me to be in the rooms where I was like, what am I coming in with? Some sort of expectation, or how long will this take, or how much time? Sometimes, though, it's not even about the time. It's just about those meaningful touch points that people appreciate. It's funny because even again, just for voice reference, I love voice texts. I'm a voice text fan. I own it. Sometimes I will send marathon voice texts. That's a whole nother thing. But for example, even on folks in my folks that I touch base with who we pretty much only live on LinkedIn, for example, I will send a voice text, and I can't tell you Ahad how many times they go, "Oh, I didn't know this was a feature here. Oh, it's so nice to hear your voice," and they start using them as well. That's all. That was a touch point. That was it. Do you see what I'm saying? So it doesn't always have to be in maybe the traditional sense we think of. Although I hear you with, because I seek that as well. What are then the next level deeper, like true friendships versus just my bigger ecosystem that I enjoy interacting with, but my true friendships and who's going to be there for me when I'm there for them? That's a great question. I am always in search of those deeper connections, but I think if we go at our bigger ecosystem of those who are meant to come into our lives at different times in different ways and different points without expecting some sort of direct either reciprocity or that we will constantly have to pour into that, I think that's going to burn anyone out and not be as true to just showing up, being present in the moment for what's needed, and then trusting and releasing until the next time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it sounds like it goes back to your simplifying and decisiveness mantras that you have in your life, right? That you have to
Yeah.
simplify, and then you have to
Yeah.
decide if you are
Yeah.
there, if this works for you, if it doesn't work
Yeah.
for you. I do have
Yeah.
the pleasure of meeting some people who are openly helping me out, who are there, and I'm
Yeah.
quite shocked because I know them only once, and they just go
Yeah.
like, "Hey, this is who we are," and I'm like, okay, now I'm seeing the people who I
Yes.
can resonate with, right? And I'm like, okay, I'm
Yes.
going to do more for you because I can see you do what you want to do more for me, etc.,
Yes.
etc. And it is a learning process, as mentioned with entrepreneurship, as mentioned with anything,
Yeah.
as your clients would face when they have to fix up their voice or they have to do preventive care. It's a learning process of understanding what's important to you and
Yeah.
understanding how we can get there. So thank you so much for that. I really enjoyed that. I want to go back
Absolutely.
to I want to go back to voice and
Yeah.
start dialing down our conversation. But before I do that, you said you love voice text. I love it too. If you must have seen the Stitch format that we're now releasing, it's basically me and a friend of mine sending voice notes to each other, and that's the podcast. Because we really enjoy that over face
I
to
love
face.
it.
Because in face to face,
Yep.
our argument is we have to think on the spot because we're discussing like very trivial topics like politics or
Yeah.
philosophy or society. So you want to think about it. You want it to stare a little bit. So you listen to the voice note and then you listen to the voice note again, and then you're walking
Yeah.
outside and you're like, I have this idea and I want to share it. So
Exactly.
so before I tell you my max what voice note limit, what's the longest you have talked?
Oh, I feel called out. I will admit because it was a very to me delightful day when in Facebook Messenger they changed from 1 minute limits to unlimited minutes. A friend and I, there may be 28 minutes of a voice note, just a 28-minute voice note. Like, really?
So you sent the 28-minute voice note.
Yes. Yes. But to be fair, kind of like you and your friend, we because of like time zone differences and stuff, we don't always like match up. So we were just like, hey, you fill me in, I'll fill you in. Listen when you can, no rush, and the next thing you know, you've just racked up a nice long monologue for them.
I love that. I love that. I actually received a 21-minute voice note from my friend.
Nice.
I
Did
love
you
that.
listen to the whole thing?
Yeah, but, well, we're more WhatsApp users than Messenger users here.
Okay.
And in
Yeah.
Messenger, people are telling me this, but I haven't seen it yet. But you have a speed up feature that I haven't
Yeah.
seen in Messenger yet. But in
No.
WhatsApp, it does
No.
exist. So I listen
Okay,
to it
that's
on
good to know.
2x.
Okay, good.
Then time flies. So I'm like, okay. Because when you're listening at 2x, the funny part is you're also focused more because it's going so fast, you want to catch it. Then time
Yep.
flies because you're not bored anymore. You're like, I'm focusing. But if it's 1x, then I just
Exactly.
get so exhausted. I'm like, I get what you're saying. Can you speed up a little bit? Because I get what you're saying. So yes, 21
Exactly.
minutes is what I have gotten. I think the max I
Yeah.
have given for so far is 13 minutes. But that's because
Nice.
that podcast, well, because
Double
of those
digits.
podcasts. Yeah, double digits, double
Yeah.
digits. We broke the double digits. But 28 minutes
Oh,
is a record of sorts, Brienne. So I'm
I've had to rein myself in. Let me tell you, more people than you would imagine remind me the importance of brevity. So I'm getting there slowly.
you came to the right podcast to not learn brevity because here I am not into that. People tell me I need to be more concise. I'm like, no, I don't need to be. Why should I be concise? There is so much time in the world. We have so much computational power in the world. We have so much storage in the world. We don't need to be
Yeah.
concise anymore. It's not like we're paying per minute like back in the day when we were calling each other on the telephones, or we're paying
Yeah.
per letter on the newspaper, right? No, we're not. It's
Exactly.
now we have unlimited. Even Twitter and everything is becoming
Exactly.
longer and longer. So you don't need brevity. I have some
It's
people who argue brevity is important, and I do agree in certain contexts. But if you're talking to friends, if you're catching
yeah.
up with people, that's what I mean by the relationship part, right? So if you're in an ecosystem, brevity is important, sure. But if you're in a relationship where you just want to vent, where you just want to talk to
Yeah.
each other, I was recently, I'm really obsessed with the life before smartphones. Just to understand what
Mm,
did we do, because it's
yeah.
difficult to remember what we did. And I was
A
listening to
little
stories
bit.
of people saying that we were debating for 2 hours over some scientific fact that we couldn't check
Right.
because we
That we
didn't
couldn't
have
Google.
Google.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was amazed by that just one story, because I was
Yeah.
like, my God, we don't have conversations anymore.
No,
Everything
we
is so
don't. But that
quick.
they are, but that also speaks to my belief that I don't think we need to cater to these ideas that our attention spans are no longer sufficient. Because that same idea, people are like, it needs to be brief, it needs to be concise so that you keep their attention. And I'm like, or our mind is powerful. We can train our mind to regain our attention span. We're not just sitting here, dumbing ourselves down to the lowest minute, possible. So,
Yeah,
yeah, exactly. I think the analog days, oh my gosh, so memorable. And just knowing what feels most like us when we show up. If there are times where it is, like you said, needing to vent, I've gotten better about asking consent for that. Do you have a moment? Can I share this with you? And that alone can even change the trajectory of then how people show up for you too. Right.
exactly.
So,
You invite
yeah,
them in, right? You invite them in. You
yeah,
tell them, you get
exactly.
them, you prep them in a way that, hey, look, you're gonna get
Exactly.
bombarded with like long 28-minute voice notes. So be
Correct.
ready for that, right?
We're
So
ready.
yeah,
Yeah.
I can imagine. Great. So let's start toning it down. I think we had a
Yeah.
wonderful conversation, but I do want to talk a little bit more about, and towards the end of the conversation, about your new course that you're launching, Brienne. So this is
Mm,
part of your
mhm.
stretching process, I believe. This is the part of trying out new things, because now you're not focused on just vocal health of something. Now you're focusing specifically on
Yeah.
educators. Why is that?
Yeah. For each of the years that I was rehabilitating voices, people, of all walks of life and professions that needed their instrument, educators, teachers are close to my heart for various reasons. Both my daughter's dad is an educator. I've had a lot of educators throughout my life that I enjoy and respect. And every fall, so in the States here, like they get the, summertime off, and then in the fall they're back in the classroom, we would have a significant uptick of those same educators coming in already struggling with their voice, and they've still got 6 months of school left to teach. And so when I started to see how much more they were struggling, and saying, why didn't I know this when I was in teacher training? Why didn't I know about how to care for, I need my voice. How are my students going to hear me? That really became obvious to me over the years. So I would start to do little workshops and things. But honestly, this course came to me about 8-ish years ago now. And it was finally officially released on Leap Day this year. After a lot of iterations and bumps and things and learns, but it really lights me up because this is a population, at least in the States, where we need our teachers, we need our educators, and yet their well-being is usually the last thought of any bigger society approach, right? Teachers are burnt out, they're leaving the profession, they don't feel supported. Just so many issues right now in the States. And so this feels like one of those ways to support their wellness while also ensuring they still have a voice for their livelihood. They can still do what they love if they are choosing to still be in the classroom. So, yeah, I created this as a way to bridge that gap for them.
Now it has, of course, it has the business element of it, but it
Yeah.
that the story behind it and the way you want to take care of people adds an element of genuine concern in a way that I personally
Yeah.
feel, because I
Yeah.
completely agree with you. If I can be honest, I want to retire as a teacher if I could,
Oh,
right?
wow.
If I could.
Yeah.
I have done trainings, I have done teaching for a couple of years now, almost hitting 5 years already.
Oh, that's
But
awesome.
that's
Yeah.
mostly adult education, data
Yeah.
education. The field that I'm in is so niched for so many people that they want to know more about it. So I'm the person
Right.
they call up because they're like, "Hey, you seem like a guy who can really make it simple." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's my
Yeah.
job." And that's thanks
That's
to
awesome.
the lack of brevity I have, so that I can explain in nuanced way
Yeah.
what data actually is. And I
Right.
also got very lucky in having a chance to teach data in a university and also teach critical thinking in a middle school. And
Yeah.
I loved it. I think there's no better, you can say, more noble role in a society you can play than actually trying to organize the thoughts of the next generation, equip them with the right skills, make them
Yeah.
understand what's important in life. I think it's quite important, and that's why I really respect the world of Finland. At least that's what I've heard. In the
Mm.
days of Google, unless you have a citation in your hand, you should not claim anything. But this is what I heard, so I don't know if it's true or not. But in Finland, only the top 1 to 3% of the graduating class are allowed to be teachers. So it's a profession that is only for the elite. If you are good at what you do, only then you're allowed to be a teacher. Otherwise, not, because they like, we're trusting you with the next generation of Finns, and we will
Yeah.
not trust anybody. You need to be the best of the best
Wow.
to get a chance. And then
Yep.
you, of course, the pay is accordingly as well, because
Oh, well,
they're the
thank
best of the
goodness.
best.
Yeah, they're
So
getting compensated. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but that's how you
Oh.
build demand, right? If you pay a lot
Mhm.
for it, then you can ask a
Yep.
lot for it, and then people will
That's right.
show up demanding that, okay, we should be taken care of, but we know what is
Yeah.
expected of us as well. So
That's right.
I'm really, really
That's right.
happy about this course. I'm really, really excited about it.
Yeah.
We will share the
Yeah.
link of that course in the
Thank
show notes.
you.
So if you
Oh,
have anything
fabulous.
that any details that you want to share, please let us know, and we'll put everything
Yeah.
on the show notes so that anyone who's reaching out to Brienne can easily do that through the podcast. So that would be nice. Brienne, I want to close this conversation now because I feel like I'm losing my voice. So
Okay.
I want to end it with a request from you. I am planning to give a talk at the end of the year. It is
Mm.
gonna be a TEDx that I'm gonna be doing here in Eindhoven.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. So
Yeah,
if I
that's
had to
exciting.
ask you
Yeah.
for 5 tips to maintain
Yeah.
my health for
Mm-hmm.
November, what would they be?
Remember. Mm. Uh, First and foremost, I can definitely also make sure you guys have the link for my 10 tips that I would
Oh,
get you and your audience started with. But yes, the key 5 ones for sure would be first awareness. You said the exact thing. Ooh, my voice, something's different. It's changing. I'm losing it a little bit. Whatever that sensation or quality change is, honoring that, noticing that, not just pushing through it. So that's a big one, Ahad. Between now and November, if there are times where you're like, ooh, my voice is tipping the scale of not really being optimal, don't push through. I don't care whether it's in background noise or you're out with friends and family or screaming and cheering and hollering, just don't. So try to notice in the big picture of what you are required to do with your voice, personal and professional, where can you be a little more strategic with, you know what? I think I'll just text. I think I'll just take a break for a minute. Okay. So that's a big one because the pushing through is very deceiving because then you're like, oh, it's fine. I've got a little more in the tank. And then you don't. Okay.
okay.
Number two is most people think, oh, drink water. You'll be fine. Okay. First of all, we don't know enough yet in the scientific side of how much water we drink actually gets to our larynx, to our vocal folds. It is a self lubricating system. So, yes, we do need water, but just because you're drinking, certain amount of water a day does not necessarily mean that's going to be sufficient for your voice. So I want you to both consider, are you drinking enough water for yourself? You'll know because if you get thirsty too often, you're underhydrated. And another way to get water or moisture is through steaming. So I want you to consider start steaming. Now that could be shower, but steaming like boiling water, putting the towel over the head, breathing in the steam. There's even little portable handheld devices that are easy to have around and travel with. But steam is actually going to get into the airways and be really soothing. Okay. So when the scratchiness starts or the tickles, those kind of things. The next thing I would say for you is, yeah, especially when you're practicing your talk, don't keep practicing just for the sake of practicing. Do a little bit of what we touched on about that being, like already envision and see yourself on the stage, how you want to sound, how that's going to flow, and connecting with it from your voice, not just repeating the words in the script 100 million times. Okay, that's going to wear out your voice for one thing during practice. You don't want to do that. And at the same time, just because you're repeating it, like we talked about, doesn't mean necessarily that you've embodied it. So allow yourself to first envision it and see it and feel it. When you start to connect to your voice, that will start to align those how you sound with what you're saying for your talk. Okay. And my fifth one would be to warm up your voice. So start doing it now, even little warm ups, shower, in the car, just humming around the house. If you like to hum, you could do just easy, simple warm ups now. And that starts treating it just like the rest of your body, where you're not going to go necessarily to the gym or go on a run without doing some stretching. So those would be my suggestions. Let me know if
These
any applications.
these are wonderful tips. I'll be honest, it seems like a lot of work, Brienne,
It
but
does. So
it
five is a
is.
lot. So that's where when you said five, I was like, oh lordy. So you're gonna pick like one to start
Yeah,
with.
yeah,
Okay. You're
yeah.
not gonna
Okay,
do all five.
yeah, that makes me feel better because I'm like that's a
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, no.
because I'm
Don't
a big
dive in
fan
and
of
do all the
preventive
things.
medicine. I'm a big fan of preventive care as well, personally, in terms of health,
Nice.
in terms of wealth, in terms of mind,
Yeah.
and anything. Try to be as preventive as you can because you don't need to fix the symptom, but the cause.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to trying this, but yeah, I'm also a person of who understands iterative improvement. So you can't
Yeah.
pick all five and do it at the same time. You're gonna be
Nope.
failing at it. So you need to pick one and then
Yeah.
you need to build up on
One
it as
thing.
much as you can. But
That's fair.
have you, because you are into voice and everything, and this I wanted to end the conversation, but I remember this thing. It's a very specifically South Asian thing, so I don't know if you know about this, but you must know singing rituals and how the singers keep their voices clean as much as they can.
Mm-hmm.
So there
Mm-hmm.
must be some things which are scientifically proven, some things which aren't. So I don't know much
Yeah.
about that. But in our region of the world, we have a certain type of singing that is quite
Yes.
famous. It's called kavalis, which are thing like they're like hymns that they speak.
Okay.
And
Okay.
the famous artists who do all of this stuff have a very interesting ritual where they chew a lot of, I won't say tobacco, but it's a byproduct of tobacco in a way, and it's basically what we call in Urdu pan. But in reality, what is it? It's just leaf, and in the leaf you have a lot of
Mm.
different sauces, different things, and it's
Yeah.
a sweet slash bitter thing, and they keep that all the time in their mouth and they're swallowing it around, and they say that it's does wonders for your throat and keeps it because they hit high notes and they hit high notes constantly. So that's literally their
Yes.
job. So when you
Yeah.
enroll into these things and try to learn to be a kaval, they teach you to do these things because it keeps you mouth fit. So I don't know if that's true or not. It seems like I wanted to ask you, or
That's,
like I want
yeah.
for you to share your opinion on it because I know you don't
Yeah.
know it yet. Maybe you will research it. But what
Yeah.
are your thoughts on that?
Great. Well, two things. One, since that's what they're already trained to do, to sing, and is there chanting involved too in
In
this
a way,
style of
yeah,
singing?
yeah,
A little bit. Okay. Hitting high notes. That is that for in singing world too. That's an athleticism, right? So they're trained to do that with their instrument. So just the fact that they can do it is likely a result of the training that they've had and the technique being appropriate. Not every person teaches appropriate technique and then
yeah,
they're injury. On the flip side, I hate to burst everyone's bubble, but nothing that you ingest touches your vocal folds.
yeah,
Nothing that you put in your mouth touches your vocal folds. It shouldn't. Please let me know if it does, because that's choking and that's a whole nother issue. So to this point, my educated estimate is that it is keeping the saliva production going in the mouth, keeping things soothed and lubricated, which then gives the sensation that things are really going well and smoothly, and so the voice continues to operate in the way it's meant to. So I think it's a little bit of both. You couldn't just do that with a dry mouth, dry throat, fair. And also, if you're continuing to, do that style of singing or hit high notes, at some point, this is a stress strain mechanism. There's
yeah.
still going to be wear and tear. And so that also has to be mitigated. But yeah, it sounds like what they're using is relative to keeping the overall environment of the throat as optimal as possible. But I would say even if they didn't do that, they could still do what they do.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
maybe, but I don't know.
Yeah.
This is the struggle that I personally face with Western medicine is it only looks at Western superstitions
Yeah.
and Western modes of healing and tries to
Yep.
prove or disprove it. But
Yeah.
there's a whole Eastern area that is still under research or
Yeah.
not enough researched.
Yeah.
And yeah, if you use Western medication and Western academia to try to resolve it, you do
Yeah.
fall short sometimes because you're like, I don't know, I haven't tested that yet. So
Yeah.
that's why I wanted
Yeah.
an opinion on it. But yeah, we don't
I
know,
love it.
so we have to figure
I
it
love
out ourselves.
exactly. And
Yeah,
exactly. And I love the power of placebo, right? Like maybe there is something physical that's changing in the tissue, in the mouth, in the saliva. All of that physiology is amazing to me. And just the comfort of having that there could be enough
yeah,
to feel that like I am in my zone. I am doing what I need to do. This my voice feels amazing. It's flowing. Yeah, I think it's fascinating, and we absolutely have to look at all the different, alternative modalities and ways people do what they do. You know,
indeed.
that's so
Indeed. Well,
cool.
thank you so much, Brienne. An hour flew
Thank
by
you so
as we
much.
discussed. It
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 did.
it is so easy to talk to someone who is so easy to talk to. So
Oh, thank you.
it was
You
a
as well.
wonderful experience for me. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.
Yes, absolutely. I think your insight and your questions, and I told you this even before we got started, I just admire the depth with which you approach it and the genuineness. And that is something that you don't often see in a space where people are trying to get, when in actuality, you are coming with your genuine inquisitive nature. And that's very giving. So
Thank you
thank you.
so much. Yes, indeed, we try our
Yeah.
best, and we hope
Yeah, of
we get somewhere. So thank you so much, Brienne, for your time.
course.
Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. This is the Weekly Bustle, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.